Okay, so my name is Clayton Burke, and I did my place of historical significance was Anza Borrego Desert State Park in northern San Diego County, as you see in front of us. So, some reasons why I selected the location. The location I've actually been to before on a trip with my mom. She actually works at one of the resorts over there in near Anza Borrego State Park. Um, I'm very familiar with the area. I've been there once. Probably going to go there again, maybe in summer or fall sometime. I know the geology of the area and some of the desert climate. I know what the spring bloom looks like, um, and a lot of aspects of the park I've learned just from visiting the visitor center. I've learned about the indigenous people in the park and different aspects of the park that most people don't get to see. I've seen, so that's why I chose the area. And it does have a very rich cultural past as well. And some of the best aspects of the park are the geology. It almost looks like the Badlands National Park in, I think it's North or South Dakota. So, some significance of the park. The park's actually one of the largest parks in the United States, if not almost the country. It nestles right in between Los Angeles and San Diego near the Salton Sea. It's relative to indigenous history because of the Kumye people that actually fled there from the Spanish in the 1800s, um, fleeing colonization. And actually, the indigenous people have been nestling there for almost 12,000 years. So even before people have started settling the United States, there have been tribes there before. And also, as well, the climate in the area is extremely hot in summer. And spring is really one of the only times, it has a super bloom kind of, a lot of state flowers in the area. So the connection between, I connected the culture of conquest because it was fitting for this kind of chapter in the book and this type of situation the indigenous people had in the area. So the culture of conquest, um, in retrospect, was a culture of domination. It was a ideology that the people that lived there were typically the enemy, and governments in large countries like Spain at the time and England wanted to conquest land for their countries to show them that this is, the place where we can colonize, the place where we can gain money, power, influence, and those type of things. With that being said, um, that type of ideology led to a genocide of the Kumye people and the people in California that were indigenous. Almost, um, from later slides, almost 100,000 natives were killed in California because of the conquest destiny or the culture of conquest. So, the danger of a single story. There's a brief summary. This ties in with Anza Borrego because a lot of the settlers that came down to the area, they believed that only one story was being told, that the natives were some type of savage people that, attacked and violence and that type of thing. But in all reality, they were people who were maintained the land and maintained their way of life and tried to avoid the settlers as much as possible because of their way, their social society was trying to influence other regions of the world and regions in California that the local tribes didn't want to get into. So most of the people in the San Diego area, when they came in, were Spanish, and then in Southern California, most of the tribes, the Kumye people, um, they were basically fleeing to the Anza Borrego State Park because of the Spanish Christian uh, Catholicism kind of influence that they have, and we'll see that in the next slide coming up. So, colonization. Colonization was huge for the 21 missions on from the Spanish Empire to basically go out and say, hey, we're going to spread our religion into the native people because we see them as savages. We see them as one type of, one viewpoint, which we've been learning about in chapters 1 through 4. But the native people in the area of San Diego, the native tribes actually retaliated against the Spanish by burning down their churches because the Spanish militia were raping their women. So a lot of people don't know that, and it was something that was surprising to me when I first found out about it. So colonization affects the native, basically the native population, because as more people from outside come in, then they want to have a bigger influence and start to mistreat the people that have been there for a long time. So colonial expansion, the expansion of the Spanish Empire in the 15, the 16, the 1700s in California was extremely significant because of the decimation of the native populations, especially in the area of San Diego and the area of San Francisco. And then after gold was discovered in the 1800s, it just got worse with more settlers coming over and almost causing a huge genocide of Native Americans because they're practically in the way of them discovering gold and other conquests that needed to be discovered. So the religious influence, the Spanish practiced Catholicism, which their goal was to, like I said in the last slide, was to set up their 21 missions in California, um, along the coast. And what ended up happening was a lot of them brutally treated the Native American populations instead of uh, their own people. They just pushed against the natives in the area, especially in the San Diego area, and they believed that uh, they could convert them into Spanish settlers and actually convert them almost into forced labor. So basically, slavery if they were to conform with their culture. But in the 1800s, they had ethnic cleansing, which the settlers from the eastern part of the United States believed that term was basically necessary to describe the mass genocide of Native people. And removal and resilience. The removal of the local indigenous people were something that happened all over the United States in the 1800s. And what ended up happening, the Kumeyaay people were pushed into the rocks and caves of Anza Borrego Desert State Park, where now you can see the basically hieroglyphics on the rocks and such, and it tells their story. And there's a couple resources down in my annotated bibliography of different aspects of people, having these types of stories and how they fled up to the caves to basically escape Spanish rule and to escape people because they didn't have enough manpower because they have been slaughtered by local militia that have came in, and then eventually in the 1800s by even more um, settlers and the U.S. basically the U.S. arsenal that came in. And when they found gold in Julian, which is an hour and a half away, then it just got worse. But to wrap up, so some of the history of the Kumeyaay tribe has basically been a history of basically fleeing and basically making a new land for themselves almost every century they've been alive. This plays a lot into resilience, which is chapter 4 and 5, if I'm not mistaken. And it plays into that because when Andrew Jackson basically said, in the 1800s, we need to remove these people because they're taking land, we're moving them to reservations. And the Kumeyaay people have been moved constantly by the colonizers that were there. And when it ended up happening, they got pushed farther and farther out. But now in the 21st century, they're starting to come back to their original land, with the They have multiple reservations all over San Diego County, um, and now they have a lot of income coming in from casinos and such. But that wraps up my presentation for Anza Borrego State Park and the significance of the area.